It's time to get educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. This is the Dr. Duke Show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. Before we get started, do please hit that share button so this program goes out to as many people as possible. Before we start, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, our good friends at Clean Start. This is really serious hand sanitizer. I know it's not the sexiest product in the world, but this has a majorly useful function. It is odor-free. Odor-free. It is delivered in a foam pump, very clean. It lasts a full 2 hours. It kills all the germs it's supposed to kill. It can be refilled from our 2-gallon jug 19 times before you have to reorder. And if you are setting aside, like any good parent does, some kind of a safety survival kit, something for emergencies, get this, get 2 gallons of this. It also heals wounds, helps wounds to heal more quickly. Simply visit freedomproject.com/clean. That is KLEEN to get your order. Again, freedomproject.com/KLEEN. Today, we start in Oregon, where parents are furious after a video surfaces showing 5-year-old children forced out in the 40-degree weather to eat their lunch and sit on paint buckets, all because their idiotic school teachers and administrators are terrified about COVID.
And you may be saying to yourself, Dr. Duke, that didn't happen. Take a look for yourself. These are the children at the Capitol Hill Elementary School in Portland, and you see them sitting socially distanced on their buckets, eating their lunches.
And it's clearly a cool, cold winter day there. It's got to be quite chilly. You see all the rotten leaves and other cesspool stuff. And this is what they're doing. Now, question. Where are the teachers eating their lunch?
They're going to argue that they don't get to eat lunch. So
yes.
we will see. That's a very good question. Where are they eating their lunch?
Where
and you could hear the children laughing and having a good time, right?
Yes.
Everyone heard that?
The eerie silence of not even chewing is heard.
Ugh. Well, one parent who has a student at Capitol Hill Elementary said that this policy is abhorrent. I'm beyond furious, especially knowing children are low risk. Governor Brown, Governor Kate Brown, you know her. She's the one who, basically thinks that it's okay to loot and riot and burn things down, but hey, mask up always and forever, except me, of course. When I'm in public, she says, I don't necessarily have to mask up. That's why it's okay for her to, be out and about schmoozing and all, because it's all in the name of community or something.
So what you ought to do is make the governor sit outside in the cold with all of her LGBTQ talent around her, force her to wear a mask, force her to have a tiny little hole in her mask where she's only allowed to drink liquids, all right, because we want to make sure nobody catches any diseases. Oh, and her with her LGBT crowd. And note, they're not worried about any kind of diseases at all, nor are they sitting on paint buckets.
Yes, well, according to this parent, Governor Brown's maskless in D.C. this weekend was the last straw. We've been patient with all of the policies here in Portland in hopes of not being ostracized within the community, but this is the last straw. I will be picking my child up to have lunch at home. Well, we know one child who's just 3 years old and is going to have lunch all masked up, and of course that's Press Secretary Jen Psaki's young son, but hey, it's okay. He's okay with it.
Well, schools are taking steps, especially since we've only recently approved through the CDC and FDA vaccines for 5 to 11-year-olds. They're not approved for kids younger than that, to keep their kids safe and keep students safe. I will tell you, I have a 3-year-old who goes to school, sits outside for snacks and lunch, wears a mask inside, and it's no big deal to him.
I heard that mom, where you said there was one mom who said this was the last straw. She is taking her kid home to have to feed him lunch. So with all due respect, madam, the last straw is not the last straw until you pull your kid out of that ridiculous school who thinks they have the right to do that to your children.
Yeah, we'll see if anyone pulls their kids actually out of.
That's the last straw, right? And apparently, even after all of this, moms aren't quite ready to pull that last straw.
Well, this could be happening in your state, but in Oregon, the Oregon Health Authority, OHA, had gathered a rules advisory committee to consider a permanent indoor mask mandate in the state. There's a medical doctor for communicable diseases, who said that permanent means indefinite. It doesn't necessarily mean permanent. We can repeal it as well, but we are only allowed to have a temporary rule for 180 days, and anything that goes beyond 180 days, we cannot extend it. So the politicians, they had made this back on August 24th, was the 180-day policy, because if your governor's doing this, well, you live in a blue state. They're putting out 180 days, and then in that time, they're trying to make it so that they can put it on the books permanently, like in the case of Oregon. And again, depending on where you live, this is probably happening as well.
With all the censorship taking place on social media platforms, we've made it easy to keep up with your favorite content. Simply download the Freedom Project Media app in your app store. Get access to 18 new videos a week, plus thousands of archived shows, lecture series, and educational animations. Download the Freedom Project Media app on your Apple TV, Roku, tablet, or phone, and make sure you allow for notifications to keep you informed.
We definitely want to fight racism, and in order for us to fight racism, we must segregate the children. If that was said by anyone other than what we're having in this next story, you'd be called a racist, but we're in Manhattan, New York, and that's posh.
Hey, Katie.
Hey.
We have a
Dr.
breakout
Duke.
of racism. Get the racists out of the back room to fight them.
Dun, dun, dun. So, New York City, Manhattan Junior High School, the Lower Manhattan Community School, to be specific, in November decided to conduct very controversial, at least I would call them controversial, exercises as part of their mission to undo the legacy of racism and oppression in this country that impacts our school community. That was according to at least an email that was sent out to the parents. Principal Shayna Douglas wrote in the email, kids in grades 7 and 8 will opt into one of 5 categories. Whites, Asians, and multiracial students have their own categories, while the African American and Hispanic students are combined into one group. As Douglas said on November 23rd and 24th, 7th and 8th graders will explore the question, how do our racial identities influence our experiences? An affinity group is a group formed around a shared interest. Ooh, so they're in their affinity groups. They're going to make this sound like Captain Planet, where you're divided by heart.
Explain to me what common experience blacks and Hispanic has. Why are you taking those two radically different political groups? Take a look at just politics, right? Blacks tend to weigh much more heavily to the Democrats, while we see in coming elections, the Hispanics are going way for Republicans in unprecedented numbers. Why would we yoke them together this way, Katie?
I'm going to go with this has absolutely nothing to do with actual understanding of the various races and different experiences. It's more, I think, the numbers. Because if you take a look, I mean, clearly we need to have this because it's a bunch of whiteys running around at this school, except it's not. We have 44% of the students being Asian, 29% are white, 15% Hispanic, and 8% black. Now, they also didn't mention in here, because they're having the multiracial as its own group, actually how that math breaks into this. But when you have 44% Asian student population, then 29% white, again, 15% Hispanic, 8% black. I think it was just those were the smallest groups.
No, I think if you look at the history of this racial business in this country, they only take seriously minorities as blacks and Hispanics. When was the last time Asians were taken seriously? Even when they're being beaten to death in the streets of San Francisco, we still don't take them seriously. We deny them interest at very high levels to the best schools in this country because they're too prepared. I think that what they're basically telling you is what we've heard down on the QT, down on the down low from race hucksters all across the country, particularly the race hucksters at universities, that the only real racial minority counts are blacks who count are blacks and Hispanics.
It's true. Now, we really only said like the 4 different groups, but the 5th group is the group that appears to be for those uncomfortable with the format. And these are basically what they're going to probably call behind the scenes the problem children. The cluster that is, uncomfortable, basically dividing themselves by race, will enter the discussion asking, why are we even talking about racial identity? And I'm guessing whoever's in charge of them will just be lecturing them the entire time. So we'll see what happens. But adults obviously came up with this whole idea. The DOE spokesperson Nathaniel Steyer had said this they're claiming optional program was developed in close coordination with both the school leadership team, the PTA, and the families. And he had said that it's abundantly clear to both student and parents that anyone can opt out of this 2-day celebration if they desire. At a Manhattan posh junior high school, the kids get out of academic anything to do this. I wonder what they're going to choose, or what they did choose, because it already happened.
Well, Douglas is further emphasizing race this year in her classroom in her school, because she, quote, says, students are talking about it since race has become a popular topic on social media. Or parents are talking even more about it at home due to the recent incidents across the nation. She also added that the school, as Katie already gave you those numbers, a little too white still for her tastes. And so this is a complex issue. So again, we are going to segregate kids in order to highlight racial difference rather than to teach kids to get along as one and to ignore superficial characteristics. I think, Katie, going back to your opening, I think you're correct. We are employing racism not to cure racism, but because we just like being bigoted as long as the tables are turned, who's in the crossfire of that racism.
And what's really galling for me is the fact that she actually emphasized race this year because of the students talking about it on social media, because that's now dictating what we're going to see in the classroom. This is how your education, what it has been
That's
turned
all
into.
BS. Are you telling me that the only reason she decided to do this is because she checked some social media? She's a school administrator. Of course they're up to their chin in critical race theory garbage. You don't need a fake social media excuse to turn your school into a racially segregated piece of crap school.
Well, either way, it sounds bad, is what the whole point is, that they're going off of anything but what you should actually be teaching children to do, like, again, read, write, and do arithmetic and think for themselves. Instead, we have to, even if it is a lie, whatever you're saying, the fact that she admits that social media is dictating what they do at their school tells you you should send your kids somewhere else.
The disgusting idea backfires, because when it comes to racial difference, you basically treat a Hispanic culture and African American culture as if they were the same culture. So not only are you you think you're fighting white racism with your own racism, but you're actually being racist against blacks and Hispanics by pretending they're the same people. Way to go! Piss off everybody and please nobody.
Today's show is sponsored by our friends at MyPillow. Save up to 66% on all items at MyPillow.com when you use the code Dr. Duke. That's DRDUKE. Support this show by supporting a great American company.
If you haven't been paying attention, public schools have not been doing so well in the regard that they educate the children, because they haven't been educating the children. And so we actually are going to take a look at an interview that was done by Corey DeAngelis, who's the National Director of Research at the American Federation of Children. And he, in this interview, discussed how school choice is booming again, because public school hasn't been actually educating. So in this interview, he talks about specifically 2021, because we know what happened in 2020 when schools all shut down, and then some opened in 2021, but there's still some that haven't opened really, because you had Jen Psaki over there with her masked children. But anyway, DeAngelis says that 19 states, 2021, have enacted or expanded programs to fund students as opposed to systems. 15 states have pulled their funding, membership, or participation from the National School Board Association, and I think that's even higher now, for labeling parents as domestic terrorists. The number of states with education savings accounts programs doubled from 5 to 10. This is the gold standard of school choice and the purest form of funding the family directly. Excellent. As he says, California is actually seeking to be the 11th. And if California, there's a lot of people in California, if they then get the education savings accounts, look out, world. Education, school choice is out there.
Well, out there, but it's always pullbackable, if I may coin a term, because a lot of these initiatives, they don't give the money up front; they take it afterwards. In other words, the state collects the tax the states collect the taxes, that money in their mind is no longer yours, it's theirs, then they, the state, acts as if they're doing you a favor by funding your alternative schooling. It's only a 6-month period down the road where they will say, you know what, since we're spending our money or state or federal money, regardless of where it comes from, on your kids, then you're going to have to conform to what we want you to do. It's good news. If that's the way we've got to start this, then start it that way. But keep your eyes wide open when you go into these situations, because you'd be a much better off, mom and dad, if that money was never paid to the government to begin with, if you were able to withhold it on your taxes, and then you spent it without having the government spending it for you.
You know, every fire starts with just one little flicker. Just takes one little thing to get the ball rolling, and I'm going to be optimistic about it. Now, DeAngelis said that the program, as they're talking about in California, benefits parents from all backgrounds. They can send their kids to the education provider that works best for them, public, private, charter, or homeschooling option. I'm optimistic because even in California, there's this new power dynamic unfolding. Parents are paying more attention and fighting harder than ever before, and that's what it will take. We've seen it in Virginia. We've seen it at various school boards across the nation. You have to keep fighting because the ones on the other side never stop fighting.
You know what's alarming to me, and I'm going to ask you for a percentage. What percentage of is going to be my question?
Okay.
I think there is an alarming number of public school teachers and educrats and administrators, superintendents, principals, state DPI programs, who would be perfectly content to let you teach your kids math, writing, reading, and science at home, as long as they still got the kids for 8 hours a day and could simply give them a steady diet of political activism. If they did, it's abundantly clear that the public schools don't want to teach your kids math and science, reading and writing. It gets in the way of their indoctrination. It pulls teachers from the almighty mission of turning your kids into good little progressives. I think there's a high number of educrats and teachers who would agree immediately. As long as we get your taxpayer money, as long as we get as much taxpayer money and more, then we'll let you. In fact, we'll insist. If you want them to read and write, that's on you. But you still have to send them to public schools 8 hours a day, where we will shape their political and their religious and their sociological positions. I think, how high do you think that number would be?
People who would admit it?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Say yes,
who feel that way.
Oh.
Not admitting.
Feeling.
I think it's pretty high. I'll bet it's at least 50% of the public school administrators would much rather have your kids 8 hours a day, make the same money and more, and spend no time on anything except their little socialist view of what paradise is.
Maybe. We don't know. But DeAngelis at least said, even talking about Democrats who had not previously thought much about educational options or who didn't feel all that positive before, realized maybe it's not a good idea to fund closed, failing buildings when we can fund the student directly instead. And so this leads then to, okay, what are the choices? And we've talked many times about the various choices for education, and numero uno is homeschooling, which DeAngelis says, by the way, homeschooling increased. It's at 5% to 11%, and we know that's a higher percentage among blacks. But DeAngelis says that people thought families would return to the government schools, but we've seen a mass exodus of 1.5 million students, according to the latest federal data. Meanwhile, there's a 7.1% increase in charter school enrollment classified as public schools, but they're not government run. Virginia homeschooling numbers relative to pre-pandemic have increased by at least 40%. That's pretty insane in my opinion, but parents like what they're getting when formally home educating their kids. Wait, so you mean if you, parent, are with your own child in your own home, or going to a library, or going to a museum, or getting out there and educating through experience, when you're actually together, they're learning stuff and it's a cool, good experience for everyone involved? Stop.
And isn't it funny that the schools don't know what to make of this, right? They're so bought into the idea that education is last year's news, that education as it's been practiced in the West for 2,000 years is white supremacy. What a get-out-of-free card for teachers. We now have a perfect excuse why we can't teach kids reading, writing, math, and science. It's because white supremacy. That's why. And so let's just quit altogether and spend our time in socialist la-la land by warping your kids' view on every political and cultural issue out there.
I just want to say one more example of what's happening in this nation because West Virginia is doing what hopefully all these other states should be doing. They did not have any charter schools or private school choice options in 2019. 2019. And then we had a pandemic, and then now we're in 2021. They now have enacted the most expansive education savings account program in the country. In addition to funding following every child, regardless of their income, money can be used for social needs services and therapies, private tutoring, textbooks, or other instructional materials. As DeAngelo says, West Virginia essentially went from 0 to 100. So if West Virginia is doing it, your state can too. I mean, it is possible. Now, I know you're going to say, oh, West Virginia, that way. It's possible. We just need more parents to buy into this.
Hello, it's instant classic time. I was so eager I jumped the gun. Couldn't wait to get to this segment. We're going to do some classic Christmas literature. Perhaps when there's only one. When you think of Christmas, there's really only one of the great classics that comes to mind. It's Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, of course. Whether you love the Mr. Magoo cartoon version or the Alexander Sims 1930s edition or anything in between. Scrooged with Bill Murray, whatever it is that you love, we love this story because more than perhaps any other Christmas story, this one reminds us of the true Christian verities at the heart of the season. And so I'm reading you some great quotes from the passages from the book, because I would really like to hear this goes. I want you to read this book to your kids at New Year's Eve. Sit them down. It is one of those books because of the beautiful way it's written in those beautiful Dickensian sentence-long paragraphs, the descriptions, the satire, the sarcasm, just so lovely. And then, of course, the beautiful story. But I want to share with you this particular passage because I think it's an important one. And it lays out the meaning of Christmas when Scrooge's nephew has come to invite Scrooge for Christmas dinner. And the response, of course, is bah humbug. And they get into a philosophical discussion about the nature of Christmas, one that I think is incredibly relevant for today. Quote, "There are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say," returned the nephew, "Christmas among the rest. But I am sure I have always thought of Christmas time, when it has come around, apart from the veneration due to its sacred name and origin, if anything belonging to it can be apart from that, as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time, the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year, when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good and will do me good. And I say, God bless us. Well, good advice. God bless us. Everyone, read the book.
And that wraps up this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Katie. He's Dr. Duke.
Until next time, stay educated, my friends, and God bless us everyone, mate.